I want to introduce our panelists, and these are not strangers, I'm sure, to most of you. So I thought I would just say something about each of them that you may not know. And I'll begin with Jim Oestreich, who, in addition to his very distinguished career at the New York Times and Musical America, Jim, just a couple of days ago, went to review a concert, and the person sitting next to him, on account of his body odor, asked him to move over. And now, I suppose I told this in reverse order. What I left out was that Jim had just been given a tour of Spoleto, the new concert hall in Spoleto. And it was an extremely hot day, and he had to go straight from there to the performance. And so he had been perspiring. And Jim gave me permission to say this about him.
It could have been any of a number of other reasons, too.
And Tom Morris, to my right, in addition to all he's done in our field, has an MBA from the Wharton School in Economics. And Dan Hart, an accomplished bass player, but likes to play the guitar in his free time. And Kathy Carroll has spent 25 years with the Toledo Symphony. So welcome all to the session. And still standing.
Yeah,
so
barely.
the Spring for Music Festival has been running in New York City for the past 4 years, and we want to take some time today to talk about what happened and what was going on with it, and also what was learned from it, and what from that learning may be meaningful to our wider orchestra community. And I thought I would just begin by telling you that as a New Yorker and a concert goer, this was an extraordinary experience from that standpoint alone. And taking off my hat as somebody working in our field, it was simply an amazing opportunity to be able to hear so many orchestras of such extraordinary quality, but also bringing programs that we don't typically get to hear in New York City and in a concentrated period of time. And putting my league hat back on, this also was a remarkable statement about the American orchestra scene. These were not the orchestras that one always finds in Carnegie Hall, and so it was a representation of the great depth, really, of the American orchestra movement, both in terms of the quality of performing, but also the imagination shown through the programming. So that's an impressionistic response from a concert goer, but why don't we start this off with Tom, who I think was part of the conceiving of this idea. And Tom, maybe you can just share with us what were you trying to do? What was the goal? What got this whole thing going?
I have two wonderful partners, David Foster and Mary Lou Falcone, and we had this idea. Actually, David was the initiator of the idea about 7 years ago. And the idea was there is such a diversity of great orchestras across the country that for various and sundry reasons have not been given the platform of appearing in the most competitive marketplace in the country, in New York City. And wouldn't it be great if we could, A, present and showcase this broad diversity of orchestras? Second, that we could encourage and unleash the creativity in programming in orchestras. And third, that we would price it in a very different way so that we would attract new and younger audiences. And fourth, that we would vary the concert experience in ways that would get away a bit from the sort of ritual formality of what we know as symphony orchestra concerts. Stuff like we will not allow an orchestra to perform in our festival wearing tails or tuxedos. It's in the contract. You orchestras that appear had to decide what they would wear. We didn't care what they wore, but not tails and not tuxedos. We had a hard time getting that instituted, but once it got going, orchestras got very creative about what they would wear, and on top of that, we insisted on, for example, what's called a European entrance, where the stage is empty And when the lights come up, the orchestra files out, and the orchestra, lo and behold, gets a huge round of applause, which is only appropriate. And all those kinds of things, and the famous hankies, which we'll hear about, really transformed the experience and gave the audience permission to enjoy themselves and to show their enthusiasm, as opposed to sitting there reverentially in silence. That was the idea. It was, as you probably know, it was a competition to get in. And the only requirement is an orchestra had to propose a creative program. And we have published, it's on the website, a description of what that means. It's not code for you have to do contemporary music. You just have to do a thoughtful program. And showing some ingenuity and imagination. Programs don't have to all be overture, concerto, big symphony. They don't all have to have the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto or Bolero on them. And in fact, what the results showed was there is, in fact, a terrific untapped audience for being creative with orchestral music. It's a younger audience. Our data shows consistently that over 50% of the audience was new to Carnegie Hall. So it did succeed in attracting new audiences and younger audiences and enthusiastic audiences.
Great, thank you, Tom. Let's hear from Kathy and then Dan. Why did you participate?
I think we had the opportunity to have a voice. Didn't cost any, it was just like, hey, we have ideas. Let's put some ideas out there. Which idea do we really want to get behind? We put the idea out and we were selected. So that was terrifying and thrilling at the same time.
Describe the program.
The program was, it is not just bolero and music. Sometimes it's a theatrical performance as well. We paired the Shostakovich Sixth Symphony with a seldom performed play called Every Good Boy Deserves Favor, and by Tom Stoppard. And it was a fabulous learning experience for us. It's rarely performed because what orchestra feels that it needs actors, and what acting group feels that it needs an orchestra to just add a huge expense to any kind of theatrical production. So it's not performed all that often, and we got some help from, I want to give a nod to Bill Connor in the back of the room, because we had no idea what we were getting into from the theatrical side, and he helped so much guide that process and provide us with the people that we needed to teach us how to pull all of that together. Just the excitement of learning how actors, rehearse not in service hours, but from morning until, night, and then they come back the next day and they do it again, and it's like a marathon for them, where our work is so differently measured out, and trying to match up with Carnegie Hall's expectations, and what is or what is not a prop, and what kind of danger, financial danger one encounters when you have a prop. So we tried, any props we needed, we tried to fix to the bodies of the actors on stage, and held our breath, wondering if the pendulum was going to swing $50,000 in the wrong direction, which it did not. But we had such great advisors all along the way. So we were very excited, and I think our community responded magnificently. That from my little corner grocery store, where the lady who checks people out is on the bus to go to Carnegie Hall. Of course I'm going. The orchestra's going to Carnegie Hall. And I'm like, well, there you go. Like, who's going to bag the groceries this weekend? But the point is that it, from our board down to, especially the families of our musicians were thrilled to have the spotlight shining on an organization that they love and care about, that means a lot to our community. And that just came full circle back to us about we are important. We have a role in this community and a relationship with these people, and every one of them is sort of cheering us. You know, it was kind of the World Series of music that we got to perform in this. We had an extraordinary number of people who came and were thrilled that Buffalo then challenged its community to beat Toledo. So, I mean, you can imagine how thrilling that was 3 years later that we were still holding the record. But it was that weekend in New York, which was perfect weather, and every few steps you took, you ran into somebody who was from Northwest Ohio, and here they were in New York all together for such a wonderful purpose. It was a grand event. One of the things that we did was to take ideas. You know, we thought, well, if we're going to share, we ought to learn. And we did take the Oregon program and programmed it for the following year. So that was our souvenir that we wanted to bring back to our community. It was a taste of what someone else had presented. And it was powerful for us to be presenting that and to give it the kind of honor of a former, you know, that we shared the stage at this time, you know, in this week. So it was an incredible experience, and I have to say that it really has informed a sort of spirit of boldness in programming. We yearn for another opportunity like that, you know, the big moment. Certainly our musicians were, it was for them a key moment, and it was transformational in what it did to us and our expectations of ourselves going forward.
And Kathy, just a quick question. Did you do the program you brought to Carnegie Hall? Did you do that in Toledo also first?
Yes, we did it well, it was our rehearsal. So we did our dress rehearsal in Toledo, and then we came to Carnegie Hall with it, so it was economic efficiency to do that. And our audience in Toledo was a little like, what's going on up there? Like the slides and everything. But they were prepared to love it because it was going to go to New York. They were prepared to want to respond positively and to be open to it.
So they understood the context of that program.
Yes.
Okay, great, good.
And that it was a winning idea gave us a lot of people, a lot of acceptance came with that. So that, like, well, it must be good. I mean, I don't really know anything about it, but, you know, it's going to be at Carnegie Hall. So that was helpful.
Thanks, Kathy. And Dan, why don't you start with your program and tell us about your experience?
We were certainly attracted to the idea of an innovative program and approach to repertoire and how that ties in. I think that over Joanne's tenure with the BPO, she's really challenged our audiences and brought them along with new pieces, unknown pieces, obscure pieces, and so we brought Glier's monumental Symphony No. 3, Ilya Moravec, and we paired it with another Russian composer, Gia Concelli. And it was just, you know, I think that first and foremost, that was it, the chance to do a program like that on the stage of Carnegie Hall. We had last been there in 2003 at the invitation of a prestigious festival. I thought we thought that it would be great for our orchestra and a motivator, you know, something to get people, they'd sit up straighter in their chairs, and they really would be a long-term artistic enhancement to the orchestra because it's just such a kind of a once-in-a-lifetime event. And I think that that certainly worked. You know, we did the program in Buffalo. We've recorded it for Naxos. It's out now. Just came out last month, got good reviews. But I think we also saw it as a great opportunity to really kind of move forward the whole community engagement piece of what we're all talking about in all of our various sessions, and how to engage a community in getting excited about something and to pull in people to the orchestra that are maybe tangential. So we were working with the Visitors, Convention and Visitors Bureau. We were working with our Economic Development Department, and we got them all on board, and they saw it as just a great community event. So I think the civic pride just propelled it forward. Certainly having to compete against Toledo was the rallying cry. We had a green, but it was great. And I would think that everybody on the staff, Tom, Elaine Martone, the people at Opus 3, Lenny Stein, and Amanda Meir, Mary Lou Falcone. Everything was great. It was just a great experience for our orchestra.
And am I correct that Buffalo was, it had, if not the highest, maybe the second highest number of people from your community come? Highest?
The highest, yeah.
Highest. And how many was that?
We sold over 1,500 tickets.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And you were 1,400 or
1,499.
Jim, as someone who heard a lot of these programs, what stood out for you? I mean, did anything? What came to your mind as you looked at this breadth of programming?
I might come back to that if I could.
Sure.
As you all know, critics have no original ideas. They only jump on other people's ideas and gnaw on the bones of whatever prey is presented to them. Before I play devil's advocate with Tom, I do want to say that I've been a great supporter of this thing from the outset. I moved to New York in 1970, and yes, I'm that old. And I haunted Carnegie Hall. And in those days, you could hear, I'm sorry if this offends anyone, regional American orchestras and orchestras from all over, and it was just fantastic to have that parade of orchestras. And so when this came along, I thought, it's restoring something to Carnegie Hall that's been missing for a lot of years, and I have been and fully behind it. Having said that, I'm wondering your claim about new audiences, because the halls were not full. Most of them were not close to being full, and what they were mostly full of was people who came from following their orchestras. So I'm wondering how much you can attribute the new audiences to the programming and that sort of thing.
Let me give you the facts.
Yeah.
When you start something new, it takes time to build it. In the first year, the total capacity sales was average 54%. That's public sale and the orchestra sale. It moved to 58 in the second year, 68 and 73. And if you break that into the sales to the public versus the sales to the orchestra, in fact, the majority of the sales were to the public. So in 2014, this last May, we sold an average of 1,346 public tickets per concert versus 609 orchestra tickets. And our research is on the 1,346 people public sale, and of those, over 50% is new to Carnegie Hall. So in fact, and if you look at the numbers, what happened over time is the public sales grew faster than the orchestra sales, which actually diminished a little bit. And so that's the evidence that I would use, that there is a market that's being built here.
Good.
And while we're on that subject, Tom, what do you know about the people who came?
Predominantly New York, obviously, and these we're talking now about the public sales, not the people who came from the various cities. They were exceptionally well educated. What was amazing, they were younger than the traditional demographics of Carnegie Hall orchestra audiences. The thing that really surprised us was that only 12-13% of them each year had attended the prior year. And so what was not really, and we're waiting for the numbers analysis of 2014, but what appears to have been happening is not sort of building a body of audience, but it does suggest that it's a cumulative thing. There's separate audiences, which is encouraging to us, actually. We did sell some, we had you could buy 6 for the price of 4, or you could buy 4 for the price of 3. Over the period that grew, but the numbers of packages that were sold are in the 250 range. So there wasn't a huge number of people who came to the whole thing. There were some. And I think the other point that is worth noting, and I'll tell an anecdote that will demonstrate this. The first concert in 14 was the Christopher Rouse Requiem performed by the New York Philharmonic. This is a massive 93-minute piece for chorus, orchestra, and children's chorus. And at the intermission, a member of the staff of the New York Philharmonic sort of ruefully said to me, "Well, now we'll see how many stay for the second half." And I said, "They'll all stay, because everyone here is here to hear this piece by this orchestra." This is not, and that was a fact that I think that happened in all the concerts, is there was a built-in loyalty to the program and the orchestra for each concert. And in fact, the audience didn't run out in the second half of the Rouse. And so it's a different kind of audience, which isn't simply picking to go to a miscellaneous orchestra concert, but there was interest in the orchestra and the program. And when we surveyed the audiences, we found that combination was the key driver making decisions. It wasn't the price, although the price was sort of number 3. But there actually was a musical interest here.
And Tom, just say again, what proportion were new to Carnegie Hall's staffing?
Over 50,
Uh-huh.
it was about 53% the first 3 years were new to Carnegie Hall of the public audience.
Right. Great. Great. Jim, let's go back to the
Yeah.
to the question about the
That's right.
repertoire. Yeah.
And that was what has impressed me about it, or what?
Yeah, and anything that struck you about it? Anything surprised you? Anything that you were surprised wasn't there, that was there?
No, not particularly. I mean, as I said, it was a kind of thing that I was hoping for, and there weren't specific things in my mind that I was expecting from it. There was a lot of excitement with I think, every concert I attended. It died down a little with Hanson's Marymount, but
You should talk to Sedge Clark. I
I
yeah.
know. That's all right.
Hanson's Marymount, by the way, was recorded right here by the Seattle Symphony.
Right.
I was there.
Well, I loved it, but I've now heard it.
But no, I just, there were wonderful concerts. There wasn't a bad concert. And it was just a joy to be experienced to this kaleidoscopic thing. The one thing I should say is that, and I've heard this from other people also, that 6 nights of this back-to-back is heavy going. And as enthusiastic as I was at the beginning, thinking, well, I'm just going to go to every concert and see how I emerge at the end, I didn't do that in any year, and that's partly because there were conflicting things I had to attend, but it's also heavy going all at once. And I wonder if any thought was given to 2 weekends or any other way of somehow leavening
Actually, the first year there were 7 concerts, and it was 2 weekends, and we felt that the continuity was threatened. So the last 3 years were 6 in a row: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It is heavy going, we had talked about it, but we decided to keep it intact. It also is a good way to, I think, maximize impact. You know, in terms of how you market it. It's a time of year. It's a period of time. You could do it any way you want, I suppose. But I wouldn't spread it too much.
No, I don't think you could.
Tom, you touched on something I want to ask both Kathy and Dan to speak a little bit about, and that is what the experience was at the concerts themselves, and what it felt like to be in the audience, and how that was different from your typical concert.
Well, it was certainly that there was an energy in the room that was enormous, and you felt as though the audience was willing you to be terrific. You know, kind of as a parent might be at the talent show for the 3rd grade. You know, that there was this willingness, but it was at a different level because they were dealing with adults, and it was professional, it was serious, important what we were doing. So that was a thrill. I mean, it was electric, and hugely sort of every person kind of ignited the person next to them, and so it was very loving and powerful, and something you want to have again. Different from your usual. Now we're 6th into the 7th classics pair of this year, and it's raining or it's snowing or whatever. This was exceptional in every way, so it was terrific.
I think so too. From all the different points, the dress, the concert wear, the European entrance, the QXR interview at the beginning of the concert.
From the stage.
From the stage, yeah. I mean, everything just worked, and I really felt like people had a good time. It was festive. It was serious music, but my gosh, people really had a good time, and again, it brought out all the civic pride that we all want, and it just felt like a happening.
Yeah.
And I think it did invigorate even more our core audiences and found some new ones. I did talk to people, Tom, that were subscribers to that bought the series, because I saw them the next night when Detroit played, and I was like, "Wow, you guys are coming back!" And they said, "Yeah, we've seen all of them."
Yeah.
But and they were just interested. They said they just wanted to see something new. That's what they were there for.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Well, having gone to almost all the concerts, what Kathy and Dan report is really true. And one of the things that just struck me about these concerts was that you felt it was a very communal experience, because you got to know who was in the hall with you, and the waving of the flags was really a very big deal. And I once went to a conference at Vanderbilt University, a bunch of sociologists who were having a convening about how movements get started, and what makes social and political movements go. And one of the amazing things that they talked about was that people in a movement either have a color that they all wear, or they all wear a T-shirt, but every movement that gets started has some physical identifying feature. And it was so interesting, the power of these flags in the concert hall. And you felt like you were part of something very big and important.
And physically they were together. We always put the groups in the orchestra down in the parquet where they were all together. And as this went on, actually increasingly the orchestras themselves wanted the flags to wave back at the end. And there was one conductor who was sort of thinking that this was really, this was in the second year, who thought it was hokey. And my orchestra's at Carnegie Hall. This was the first conductor who actually at the end pulled a handkerchief out from his pocket and waved back to the audience. So he got into it. I mean, it's an infectious kind of action.
Yeah. Jim, I know you can only speak for yourself on this, but one of the things that has often frustrated me, and I know other concert goers too, is that you go to a performance and a lot goes on besides what happens on the stage. And you go to performances sometimes, and whether it's Spring for Music or anything else, where there's an extraordinary energy in the room. There could be 12 curtain calls and a standing ovation that lasts 20 minutes. And often you then read the review, and all you see in the review is an assessment of the actual musical portion with very little commentary on the nature of what the experience was. And I've always found that frustrating. I'm just curious if critics is there some rule that you're not supposed to say anything about the other stuff, or?
No, and I gather at this point you're not just talking about Spring for Music.
Yeah,
you're
just
talking
in
concerts
general.
When I have worked with young students and young critics, I have often told them that your main job is not to provide opinion, it's to tell what happened. You are a reporter before you're a critic, both in terms of importance and in terms of chronology. That the first thing you have to do is let people know what happened. Your opinions are less important. Sometimes they're almost incidental, if not incidental. So I'm a firm believer that you have to set the scene as much as you can. Having said that, you're working against very tight space restrictions most of the time, and there often are things that have to be said about the music, and they sometimes crowd out other things. And the thing that has always struck me with orchestras, and I worked for the Cleveland Orchestra for 8 months. Sorry about that.
There's a story there somewhere.
Maybe over drinks.
But the, what was I saying? What was I saying?
The space constraints.
Space, yes. The thing that has always struck me about orchestras is that the more imaginative the program you do, bringing in more and more things having to do with other than strictly musical values, the less and less is said about your orchestra, which must be very frustrating to, but you simply have a certain amount of space you have to fill. And if you do really interesting things, and we have to really describe all those interesting things, then your characterization of the performance may be reduced to a word. And you hope the word is excellent, rather than.
So these all sound like very positive responses to what took place. I mean, these were successful in the local communities for building interest in the orchestra, for rallying support, for Kathy, as you said so vividly, for opening up a sense of boldness about what would happen in the future with respect to programming. 50% of the audience members new to Carnegie Hall, great showcase for American Orchestra talent. So I guess the question I would ask is, if in fact this was successful, why isn't it happening again?
I'll answer that. This was always conceived as a 4-year experiment, and we had to raise $5 million to fund it, which we did. But with the lead time necessary for planning these things, it came time in 2011 where we had to start thinking of what was going to happen in 2015. We'd only had 1 year. And what was very apparent to us is that for this to be institutionalized and to be an ongoing activity, which is what everyone wanted, it needed to have far more ownership in New York. That means it had to really develop a New York board. It had to build a constituency around it, which takes time. And we didn't have the runway yet of experience to demonstrate success that we now have. And so we basically lost the time. We lost the opportunity to do 15, and then we lost the opportunity to do 16. And I'd say that given now the considerable success that has been demonstrated, it's from the standpoint of our organization, which is basically a virtual organization that was put together to conceive of this and to make it happen. If it's to go on starting in 17, it will take some other force in place of us or with us. A need. Does the field of music need something like this? And if so, join in making it happen. And that need could be expressed either through a group of funders potential funders who think this is so important that they will help pay for it. As I say, it needs $1.2 million, $1.3 million a year, given the current of how it's structured. And certainly, we knew all the way along that a good portion of the funding, annual funding, could continue, but it needed a broader field of funding. It could be a funder, it could be a presenting organization, Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, whatever, that believed in this to join and partner with it. It could be another organization, dare I say, such as the League of American Orchestras. You know, if this is important, someone's got to join in the fray and the belief and the commitment to it.
I'm hearing a lot of, maybe anger is too strong a word, but frustration at the fact that Carnegie, for example, hasn't picked it up. I just went back and looked at some of the first things I wrote about the festival way back when. This quote is, there are far more orchestras we'd love to bring in than we're able to. That was Clive Gillinson in April 2009. He was doing nothing but endorsing it. I think he has had reason to believe since that it's been a great success. What's wrong there?
Well, I think I'm not the right person to ask. But you know, if you really look at this and you look at it fundamentally at what it is, it's a very different pricing model. It's a very different presenting model. It's a festival. It's not based on greatest hits programming and stars. And you've got to find a partner who gets involved in this that believes in their core about what this stands for. And so it's not just about money, it's about belief.
I'm just curious how integral to the idea of the festival is Carnegie Hall as opposed to Lincoln Center, as opposed to BAM, the Kennedy Center. And I think I'm asking Dan and Kathy. I mean, what
I think it could work other places, but obviously Carnegie Hall is, you know, the watermark there and the world stage, so to speak. So from a marketing standpoint, it's a easy sell. You know, it's something that everybody understands. But if it was a festival that we were invited to at Kennedy Center, it would work for sure. BAM, maybe. Lincoln Center, sure. But I think, you know, a festival that's showcasing the breadth of American orchestras, their quality, their size, programming, could work in different places as well. I don't know if you feel the same
I
way,
agree. You know, Carnegie is the brand in terms of practice. I mean, everybody gets that. So it is an easier sell. BAM might be more of a challenge just because saying what it is, what it means, you know, BAM would be fun though.
I know there are other orchestra managers in the room, and one of the concerts, by the way, I have to comment on it. I just thought total mind blower was Detroit when they did the 4 Ives symphonies, and I mean, this was the most amazing thing, particularly when in between. I forget where, but in between some of the symphonies, Vivian Perlis came out, who's done the oral history on Ives. She talked for too long, but she pointed to the box where Ives' wife sat for the world premiere, I think, of the 2nd symphony or 3rd. I don't know, but I mean, you just had this,
When Lenny did the second
yeah,
symphony.
when Lenny did the 2nd symphony, and you know, you just had this incredible sense of place and the importance of that space and its association with Ives, and just hearing all the symphonies one after another. It was like a journey through 20th century music, hearing his own evolution. But just Anne, you know, because I see you first, but you know, Jim Rowan asked you the same thing. As you think about the significance of a showcase opportunity outside of your own cities, Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, Kennedy Center, what are the relative importance of any of those venues?
So I always think that context matters a lot when you give a concert. That may seem like an obvious statement, but our halls are our instruments, and the brand of the environment you're in becomes part of the brand of who you are. So to use Jim's phrase, that said, the brand of Spring for Music has become, I believe, much more than Carnegie Hall. And I think it was, at the beginning, it was an enormous driver and a magnet. I agree with you, Kathy, completely. I agree that it's an easy sell, but I think that Spring for Music has gone on an incredible journey, journey has reached far beyond the boundaries that it first set for itself. And I think one of those boundaries might be Carnegie Hall, and I think one might be able to see beyond it. And I think that could be very exciting. So I would say that the idea that we pursued possibilities, that Tom and his group allowed us to pursue possibilities, was at the core. And the fact that it transformed our organizations was the impact. And that transformation lives forever. I mean, it lives forever. I've got musicians who use the hanky for their shoulders, for their instruments to this day. It's on people's doors. People bring them to parties and wave them. Carnegie Hall will be with us for a very long time. And so I think thinking beyond limits is probably going to be key to a continuation of this incredible activity.
I just have to comment, though. I want to, I think we talk about a program of the 4 Ives symphonies. Well, if any orchestra manager has a meeting on programming and says, well, will that sell? Well, to put it in perspective, that concert sold 1,500 single tickets in Carnegie Hall, one of the highest ones we had. That's a public sale, because it was an event, and it became a real journey. And so the whole notion of what sells and what doesn't, that I think this industry is completely obsessed with, is just complete craziness. You have to lead taste, and what you think will sell is really a discussion of what did sell in the past, and you have to take risks. And I was going to make a comment that the write-up for this session starts with a line which I take high exception to. It says, given the practical realities of getting orchestras to the stage, the ability to experiment is a luxury. Baloney, it's a necessity.
But how do you really feel?
No, I'm sorry. We got to stop this. Come on. Try things.
Why don't we turn the discussion open to questions at this point? Questions for our panel? Bob.
Those of us who were in Minneapolis and heard the symphony do Sibelius Second, we came out of that and said, what in the world was that we heard? It was so impressive. I had an opportunity to talk to some of the musicians and ask them, did you play differently because you knew there were 800 lead people there? For Kathy and Dan, have you talked to your musicians? Did they play differently because they were on the stage of Carnegie Hall? They were on a whole different audience, a whole different level of presentation?
Well, I think it propelled them to work harder, to strive to give the very, very best performance that they can. Yeah. I think they do it regularly, but I mean, it was a big moment for sure, and everybody's attention was focused, and the recording is a testament to how well they played on that day. And so, yeah, it did certainly play into it.
They were up for the game, definitely.
And remember, audience counts too.
They were up for it too. Big time.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, from Kathy and Dan, I understand that it helps community engagement and civic pride. Did that translate in terms of the economics of that direct experience, and was there long-term positive or negative impact on the economics for the orchestra, given what it required to put on?
Well, I mean, we raised $800,000 off that single event, and we netted $500,000 to our bottom line. So that I think will translate into future gifts, because I think it just opened people's eyes. Again, it broadened our base of support. It really strengthened our brand in the community, and again, will open the eyes of people who aren't with us. So I think it will have a long-term economic impact for sure. Like Ann said, it's going to live forever, this transformation. It was transformative for sure.
The validation is huge and lingers still.
Could I ask another question on economics to Tom? in one of those early pieces, you said it's either the worst time to be starting something like this or the best time. Which was it?
Charles Dickinson.
It turned out to be the best time because, you know, I always believe that in difficult times, and this all started in the crash in 2008. But what really works in hard times are great ideas, and it turned out that it did attract the money. It was focus. So it actually, the conventional wisdom, it was the wrong time, but it turned out to be the best time.
Right.
Other questions?
Can I speak to that also? So when Detroit needed to make a commitment to go to Spring for Music, we had come off a strike. And we were in a difficult place. And Spring for Music was, speaking of galvanizing, it pulled the organization together and showed the intense commitment and pride that our city and our board and our orchestra and our management had towards propelling our organization forward. And so, just to echo, in those moments of stress is when you make the most aggressive decisions. And they pay off.
Yes.
Should we tell the story, Anne, of how that, I mean, it actually, Detroit had been accepted for the Ives program when the strike was happening, and it came a moment when Detroit had to commit, and they couldn't. And so they had to withdraw the acceptance. And the strike was settled, and all of a sudden, an orchestra that was in a year later requested to move for certain scheduling reasons that could they move, they'd been accepted also, could they move a year later? And we could do that, and knowing the situation in Detroit, you know, I called Ann and said, this could be a win-win because the timing would be perfect. So it was actually very strategic the way it worked out.
We had a question over here?
Thomas, it sounded like you had a lot of really interesting insight from putting all of this together, and it sounds like you got a lot of information from all the surveying. And I'm just curious, now that this project is done, is there any effort on your part to sort of document that and share those insights with the orchestras that have participated in the program?
Yes, we're in the process. We're building actually a special section on the Spring for Music website that over the summer is going to include a full set of documentation that's going to be available to anyone to look at it. But we're a completely transparent organization about what happened. In fact, this session's being filmed. It'll be used on the website. So yes, we want to document it as widely as we can and make it available.
I hope we'll edit out my introduction to Jim Oestreich. I forgot we were being filmed. Yeah.
I'm curious about the Spring for Music University and what some of the motivations for that program were, and also any effects it had on the audience.
One of the things that we decided early on to be pretty committed to was to try social media as much as we could. As you know, how you sell concerts and convey information is changing radically. For example, in New York City, it is completely uneconomic to use paid print advertising. I mean, it's all lovely and makes you feel good to see a nice big ad in the New York Times, but it doesn't sell tickets. Radio advertising is tough in New York because the classical music station is a public radio station. So we decided that we needed to be very aggressive with social media, and so each year we tried different things. One year we had what was called the Fantasy Program Contest, where, I mean, how many of you who are involved in orchestras or, you know, go to receptions and somebody says, well, you know, what I would like to hear a concert of such and such. And so we said, okay, so submit, you're all artistic directors, submit a program on the website, and then it was voting for preference, and there was a prize for the winning the winning program. But the idea was to engage people in the idea of what programming was about. We actually posted, starting in the second and third years, the submitted programs from all the orchestras on the website without the names of the orchestras. I wish we could have done that, but we didn't. And people were asked to vote what they thought, knowing it was not a binding vote. But what happened was amazing. Orchestras, who of course knew what their proposals were, mobilized their communities to stack the votes, and so all of a sudden what was going on was this broad community engagement around the idea of the orchestra's involvement in programming. And the Spring for Music University was an idea to create a mini MOOC about the idea of programming, and because we believe very strongly that ultimately you've got to make sense of what goes on stage.
I know we have people in the room who are from a number of orchestras that didn't participate in Spring for Music, and would be interested to hear from Dan and Kathy. From your experience, what would be your guidance to orchestras who are not about to participate in Spring for Music, but what are some of the takeaways for you that you believe translate into how an orchestra can and might be thinking about their way of conducting their business?
Well, I think we think a little bigger now, and have more confidence about ideas, which money always follows. Maybe not as much as you need, but if you have a good idea, you can probably rally support for it. And planning out further gives you even more time to rally more support and get more buy-in. So those are things that we're actively doing now. If we want to do something challenging or different or big, then let's use it in an imaginative way ahead of time so that we can get the funding that we need and make it happen. People will then come. We make the assumption if it's a good idea, people will check it out.
I think that certainly the idea of picking a big moment with innovative programming can work and should work. You don't have to go to Carnegie Hall to have a big moment in a community. You can make it happen there. But I do think that making the concert experience fun again is important, and that was just a great thing. And how can we create that feeling of what we had in Carnegie Hall in our own concert halls on maybe not every night, but maybe it is every night, but by changing what we do. And after 25 years in the business, I'm sorry to say that we're still locked into these modes of dress and decorum, and it needs to be shaken up a little bit. And that's what we got with Carnegie Hall, and that's something that somebody can do in their communities at any time if they choose to be bold. Mm-hmm. So,
Tom, I'm interested, since the idea is on the table, for what would it take to continue the festival in maybe not in its existing design, but the values that it has. Talk a little bit about how orchestras were selected, and I'm particularly interested because I know that there were some parameters drawn around eligibility, and if one were to think about continuing in some fashion, would you feel you wanted to stay with those parameters, or would you see anything changing in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it was a competition, and when we started, we knew it was 6 concerts, and we rather arbitrarily decided that the pool of eligibility would be defined as groups 1 and 2 of the league, and any orchestras in groups 3 and 4 that had won an ASCAP award for programming over the preceding 3 years. That was the criteria. That can be changed. That amounts to about 65 orchestras in very rough terms. It was also, I must say, convenient blaming it on the league.
We blamed it on you.
Well, we decided groups 1 and 2, but it's amazing there were arguments with orchestras would call and say, well, I know I'm not officially group 2, but I mean, we're about to be, and I said, it was funny. That can change. It doesn't have to stay. You can define it any way you want. But once we defined it, invitations went out to all the eligible orchestras each year, and it was actually quite a simple process. You just had to submit a program. You had to submit an alternate program, and the reason for that was to see if you could do more than one, to be candid. You had to submit your programs from the last 3 years, because we wanted to sort of understand to what degree was the programs submitted reflected in some way the values of the orchestra. You had to submit a statement of your artistic philosophy. And the way we operated, as I said, I had 2 partners. Mary Lou Falcone was in charge of marketing the concerts, David Foster and Opus 3, the production, and I was the artistic guy. I was a committee of 1 who evaluated all the proposals. I did not. It was not David and Mary Lou and I, but that was my job. It's all highly documented in our files. There was a template we developed, or I developed for rating the proposals. And we chose the orchestras, and we chose usually 1 or 2 alternates just in case. And with the RFPs, we included a full statement of the terms of the engagement. Every orchestra got exactly the same in this, which was a fee, a guarantee against the box office, and they had to deliver full radio rights and streaming rights. No negotiation. In fact, when you submitted the application, the request, you had to warrant that you agreed to the terms, because it was a most favored nation thing, which we didn't waver from. And the orchestras were selected on the basis of their program, and despite what anyone thinks, I didn't tinker or negotiate the programs with anybody. Although once an orchestra was chosen, there were 4 occasions for balance of the festival, the way it worked. There was a suggestion made to maybe make one little adjustment here, but the programs submitted were the ones that was the basis for the acceptance, without exception.
Tom, you mentioned the possibility of, say, 2017.
Yep.
Are there talks still going on with institutions or with presenters?
There are some discussions going on at this point.
Okay. And you're going to stop there.
I'd rather talk not about the discussions but the outcome.
Yeah, Jim.
So I have a question. New Jersey Symphony was involved with Spring for Music, of course,
Yes.
but I had a very different role in my organization at the time, so I wasn't privy to this particular side. I'm curious, though, to Anne and Dan and Kathy, when you were talking to your constituencies, your funders, your board, how much of the discussion was about going to Carnegie Hall and what that meant for your organization, and how much was about participating in this larger industry-wide discussion about programming and its impact on the art that we make? And was there a balance there? Was there traction with one over the other?
If you had been in an elevator with me, you would have heard about competition, Carnegie, rare opportunity, innovative programming, but in that order. Not so much the art and the challenges to the art and our own idea of how it should be on stage.
Yeah,
I think ours was also about how this could move our organization forward, a bigger picture, not so much about what it meant to the field in terms of the discussion of innovative repertoire, but what could we do with this for the long-term good of the orchestra.
And Ann, how about you?
Absolutely a local condition activity.
Mhm.
So going to Carnegie Hall was about local impact.
Right.
And I certainly didn't think about the field. I always think about Detroit
Right.
when I do anything. And how can we make it better in Detroit?
Yeah. So I'm wondering then, again, how to advance Tom's ideas about programming and how to integrate that into the takeaway from this great experiment.
Well, when I said there needs to be a need, other than 3 people who devised this and raised the money for it, a need could be a field that says, actually, the ideas behind this are important for the future of the field, and there needs to be some banding together somehow, somewhere, some way to continue to be a laboratory to carry the discussion forward. I mean, I think where we are, it's interesting, in the first year of this, in talking with orchestras, they all talked about going to Carnegie Hall. By the 4th year, they were talking about going to Spring for Music. I mean, that shift has started to happen, and that's encouraging. And clearly the numbers show that there's a trajectory. But I sort of throw it back to the field. If this means something, and clearly, despite what the conventional wisdom has been, that you need to do innovative programming. I mean, that should be the norm, in my view. And there is an audience for it, but you have to be able to address a wide range of variables, not just the program, but the price, but the time, but the dress, but the mood in the concert hall, the location. I mean, all these things can be dealt with, and if you're willing to play with all of those, there's infinite possibilities, and there is success.
The way this looks to me from a field standpoint, the value has been, makes me think about, Alex Ross went on his little trip driving around the country and got to hear a handful of orchestras in smaller cities and wrote a terrific piece, lauding our community for having great quality throughout. He's probably not going to make another one of those trips anytime soon, and there's great power, frankly, I think, in bringing orchestras together in a festival setting to showcase quality and variety, and as Tom was saying, a different kind of concert experience, the impact of pricing. All of these things, to me, demonstrate and convey a message about American orchestras that says we are widespread across our country, that we are alive artistically, we have our eyes open, we're not stuck in a rut of playing the same thing over and over again. We're prepared to experiment with what a concert feels like, and we recognize that price has been a barrier and inhibited access. And these are things that matter to us as a community of organizations. And for those reasons, I have believed and still believe that the underlying idea of showcasing our orchestras has been a good thing, and I think it's been beneficial to us from an image standpoint, from how people think about orchestras. New York is certainly, one of the great media centers of the world, and so doing it there allows that messaging to get communicated. And so I certainly think this is something that ought to continue. I'm just curious, from people in the room, and most of whom did not participate in Spring for Music, if any of what I've said or what Tom has said, do you have a perception, a sense that this is beneficial to our wider community? And if asked, would you like to see this continue in some form or fashion? So that's a question out to all of you in the audience. Anne's voting twice.
Well, they played twice.
She gets 2 votes.
Right.
Anybody else?
There's no more Ives symphonies.
Definitely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it'll give us a second shot at being part of it.
Yeah. Sarah? Yeah.
And open the boundaries.
Yeah.
Let the 5s and 6s in too. Even if we're small, don't do things that often, maybe it's also interesting.
Yeah. Everyone, Sarah was just saying open the boundaries to smaller budget orchestras.
I'm just curious, what was the pricing change from what a typical Carnegie Hall orchestral experience would be versus Spring for Music?
A typical orchestra concert at Carnegie Hall will have ticket prices up to $135, $150. In fact, our ticket price was $25 every place, and including the boxes. If you wanted a box seat, get there first. It was ticketed. I mean, it wasn't general admission, but when the tickets got on sale, go to the box office, go online, and you could get box seats for $25. $25 was lower than the lowest ticket price for most orchestra concerts in Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, so some other hands.
Hi, I'm Lisa, new with Louisiana Philharmonic, and yes, we wanted to participate in Spring for Music, but as a tier 3 orchestra, it takes a little longer to get ourselves together to find a program and do a campaign to try to do this. I knew there, and they were like, darn it, just when we get ourselves together to do this, just when we get an ASCAP award and we can actually apply, just because the festival disappears. But we want this vehicle to be able to have the programming and have the Carnegie Hall brand attached to it, Spring Music brand attached to it, to rally our own community, because Lord, that sounds hard. And even when Tom says that a very successful concert in this festival sold 1,500 tickets, what's the capacity of Carnegie Hall, and multiply that times 25. I don't know if Carnegie Hall would have thought that ticket revenue was successful. And then how does it pay for that concert? So this vehicle is good. I mean, especially in New York, we have 8 million people, and even the people traveling with the orchestra. If we try to do this in our own community, I don't know how successful, an All Lives concert will be in New Orleans. So anyway, yes, we want this as a vehicle so that we can use the branding that is attached to it to excite our own communities. It's a huge tool, and I wish that more publishing companies and ASCAP and League and everything else, if we could find a way to come together and realize this is very important and it can help all of us in our smaller communities.
The capacity of Carnegie Hall is about 2,700 seats. And as I said, by the last year, we were selling in total about 2,000, of which 1,400 were public and the rest were to the orchestras. To put that in perspective, then there's no subscription base for us. But selling 1,300, 1,400 tickets with these kinds of programs, that relates to, if you look at the New York Philharmonic's average single ticket sales above subscriptions, it's in the 800 range. And if you look at concerts in Carnegie Hall, orchestral concerts that over and above their subscription base, it's roughly in the same area. So in terms of impacting the market for individual concerts, it was becoming quite significant.
One of the things that, again, my concert going hat on that struck me was the absence of a presenter presence. And New York City has a lot of festivals, and usually, it's either a Carnegie Hall festival, it's a Lincoln Center festival, BAM, what have you. And when festivals are produced by a presenting organization, there's a lot of added assets that come along with that, particularly around making an impression in the city because of the breadth of their communications, their audience base, et cetera, and so I felt this little bit of a gap, and I'm just curious. I guess it's for you, Tom. Just thinking about another incarnation. How critical do you think it is that there be a buy-in a role for a presenter other than simply renting the facility and making it available to you?
I mean, the answer is it depends. But clearly, if you want to run a festival in a market, whatever organization is presenting it, you have to treat it as a festival. You can't treat it as 6 more concerts or 5 more concerts. And it has to have identity, and it has, and for organizations, and you all know that when you're presenting lots and lots of orchestra concerts, that's difficult to just, how do you distinguish one set of product from another? And so however you do it, it's got to have identity and distinctiveness from the other things you do, because I think the greater diversity of things that you do and present to the market, there's a pretty infinite appetite for different things. I'm amazed. I continue to be amazed at that. I'm fundamentally an optimist about the field of music.
Me too.
Me too.
Yeah. So we're running down to the final couple of minutes. Before I give each panelist a moment to offer any final remarks, are there further questions? Yeah, Bob.
For Spring for Music, there were 2 orchestras that were invited back. Did that give you pause, and then did you wonder at that point, why can these 2 orchestras come up with 2 programs or 4 programs that fit the model?
Just so everyone knows, one of the rules that we concocted was if you were selected in any one year and appeared, you could not apply the next year, but you could the year after. That was the rule, and 2 orchestras, simply continued to excel in interesting program ideas. The Albany Symphony, which has a very distinctive artistic and unique artistic profile that's very real, and in fact it wasn't a one-off set of proposals from them. It actually fit what they stand for. And the other was Oregon, Portland, Oregon, but they had a series of financial issues and had to pull out of 2013 pretty much at the last minute, and that was the occasion when it was a night adjacent to Detroit, so that's when I called Ann and thought actually I didn't want to go to call an alternate, with 6 months notice and say, you want to come and play in Carnegie Hall like next week? It's kind of, it's not fair, and so thought the easiest thing. Called Detroit and said, "You want to do a second? If you can come up with a really interesting program," which they quickly did.
So some final words. I'll ask Kathy, Dan, Jim, and Tom. I'll give you the last word. Very quickly. The success of Spring for Music, what does it mean for orchestras?
Hope.
Good.
Yeah, I think that the field is big, and there's the artistic quality is so high across this country. It's just amazing, and it should be showcased.
Great. Jim?
Well, I'm just waiting for the next festival. I mean, I'll be happier next April when I don't have to do the little crises at the very end. But that will be only momentary, and I'm standing and wait for the next festival.
Tom closes out.
I hope it can continue, but I think the message is to everyone is try things. I said it. It works. It really works.
Thank you, panel. Thank you, audience.